The Gunner is an acrobatic medium to close range class. They mainly focus on chaining quick bursts of gunfire back to back while trying to remain airborne. The weapons it has access to are the twin machine guns, which are close range, and rifles, which are longer range. That being said, you shouldn't be using rifles that much until you are much more familiar with the class. Of the two weapons, only the twin machine guns have a weapon action, which is now called Stylish Roll. When using such, you can flip around in the air with limited iframes, and can also shoot while doing so. Furthermore, you can flip in any direction you choose besides forwards, which you can eventually do with the aid of a skill ring, which I'll mention in a few minutes along with other ring suggestions. Using the weapon action 3 times in a row will cause the third flip to be much longer than the first 2. Let's now go over a few skills that really impact how gunners play. Similar to the gunner's weapon action, they only have a focus for the twin machine guns, and it's probably one of the most straightforward ones out there. Simply put, once you learn the twin machine gun's focus, you will accumulate focus when landing attacks, and then gain a damage bonus depending on how much focus you currently have. This caps out at a 30% boost at max focus. Keep in mind that the focus bar will slowly deplete over time when not attacking, and also lower when being hit. There are, however, a few skills in Gunner's tree that change how this works though. Showtime is an active buff that increases your focus accumulation rate in return for increasing your aggro or threat level. And time save decreases how much focus you lose when being hit. Now, we just mentioned Showtime as it pertains to focus, but there's another passive skill called High Time, which goes into effect during Showtime. This boosts your damage by 3% per second and caps out at 20%. And speaking of 20%, if you lose up to 20% of your max HP within 5 seconds while this is active, this bonus will be reset and start back from 0. Luckily, when maxed, this only takes roughly 7 seconds to reach 20%. There's then Encore Time, which will recast Showtime if you took no damage for its entire duration. This is useful, as unlike regular High Time, you will not lose any built-up damage when being hit when in Encore Time. Twin Machine Gun Stylish Charge allows you to forego charging PAs when using them after other PAs or techs. Next, there's 3 skills which increases your damage and crit rate when attacking at close range. This really brings home the point that they don't want you playing at range with this class when using the twin machine guns, but at least they compensate you for being closer to the fight. Attack PP Restaurant at max doubles your PP regen with normal attacks and is almost too good not to use. And Perfectionist gives up to a 20% damage buff passively so long as you're above 75% HP. And then, Chain Trigger and its modifiers are arguably the most important part of Gunner. Chain Trigger itself is an active skill that once used will mark a target in whatever location you next land a normal attack on. You will then see a chain counter pop up, which can then be raised by continuing to normal attack that marked spot. Twice chain then doubles how fast this counter raises. If at any time during Chain Trigger you use a PA, you will activate the finisher and will have 3 seconds to spam as many more PAs as possible. This now ties into the counter you previously raised, as the higher the counter was before initiating a PA, the higher the damage your following PAs will have. The Chain Finish skill itself will further increase the damage of this too. The coolest part about all of this is that with Chain Bonus Finisher, the higher you previously got the counter, the more Chain Trigger's cooldown will be reduced. At the count of 100, which is pretty easy and fast to get, this reduces it enough for near instant reuse. And because of how often this should now be up, your rotation should revolve around using this on bosses back to back. That all being said, you should really try to get into the habit of using Chain Trigger, as it grants up to 5 times more damage to your PAs with a max counter. There's a bunch of very useful PAs for the twin machine guns. But the only few I'd like to mention right now are Aerial Fire and Grim Barrage. Aerial Fire will be one of your most useful tools to gain and maintain your height while airborne, and you should get into the habit of using this early on. Both the charged and uncharged versions will raise you up in the air, but the uncharged one will be significantly less. And then I simply wanted to mention Grim Barrage, as it's an amazing mobility PA that has some really good travel distance, and if used when in the air and locked on, you can move vertically too. So be sure to pick this up ASAP to get around faster. Forward Stylish Roll is the ring I alluded to at the beginning when talking about how the weapon action movement lets you go in any direction besides forwards. Well, this lets you go forwards. On top of that, you get up to 20% more damage when attacking with the forwards roll too. This is generally looked at as pretty essential. The rings we'll be covering going forward are all very helpful too, but Forward Stylish Roll is so good that you might not be able to make use of the other ones until future updates when we can copy rings effects into units. but let's mention a few anyways so you can prepare for the future and in case you play the Japan version. Leaping dodge allows you to jump higher than a normal double jump when using it from the sub ballot hotbar. This is pretty nice on Gunner as it spends most of its time up in the air anyways, and it's also pretty useful in other classes too. TMG Stance Up grants a 10% damage boost when using a stance skill from a subclass. This ring can also be pretty essential too, right after forward stylish roll. Time after time preserve changes how high time works in that instead of having to take 20% of your max HP within 5 seconds to reset high time, it now takes 40%. This dramatically decreases the chance of you losing your high time bonus as frequently. Mate Maniac speeds up the usage of mate items by 60% and increases their potency by 20%. It's an all-around good ring to have for multiple classes, but isn't as necessary if you are using a Hunter sub, because of its automate half-line. Atomizer Fanatic is similar to the previously mentioned ring, but it works for atomizers instead. However, it allows you to use them twice as fast as normal and with a 60% potency. This too is also just a nice ring to have and to use on multiple classes. As usual, I'm going to leave the right ring of choice up to you since it's more or less just filling in the gaps depending on which subclass you choose. I will however mention one that synergizes pretty well with Gunner, which is HP Restorate. At max, this ring will restore 7.5% HP every 5 seconds. Not only is the passive healing nice in general, but it will help keep Perfectionist going, which only works when you're above 75% HP. If you use Summoner as a sub though, you won't be able to use this ring because they have this skill built in. Hunter as a subclass will grant you lots of unconditional damage through its Fury stance and its perfect attack bonuses. It also gives great survivability with its active buff Hunter physique, and its passive skill is Iron Will, which gives the chance to survive an otherwise lethal hit, and Automate Half-Line, which automatically uses a mate item when your HP falls below 50%. All in all, most Gunners prefer to use Hunter as a sub, especially when starting out, as there's nothing else to think about when using it and you gain so much from it. Fighter is a very strong subclass to Gunner, but should be saved for once you're more familiar with the Gunner itself. That being said, a Fighter sub will first and foremost give you extra damage through its 2 stances. You will also have access to Tech Art's Perfect Attack bonus and Combo Variant Perfect Attack PP save, that together will give a damage bonus and reduction in PP cost when consecutively perfect attacking with different PAs. Photon Slayer also adds a nice damage bonus when under 50% PP, which can occur quite often. Summoner is nice as it offers lots of stat ups, passive damage increases almost on par with other subclasses stances, passive healing, and an active debuff you can place on an enemy for additional damage. This however requires a lot more attention to detail and micromanaging and is not recommended for beginners or for mobbing. For a long time, Ranger was looked at as the best sub to Gunner, but that was only because of the damage it could do when all the stars aligned. However, this became much more of a chore to upkeep, and due to that, it's not as used as much anymore, but it's still pretty good. Advanced Precision Hit will give you a bonus to weak spots. Stationary Fire will give you a damage bonus after you stand still for a little bit, and Mobile Fire is the exact opposite of that, which will give you a damage bonus when moving, so you will be gaining a damage bonus either way. You will also have access to a rifle skill, Blight Rounds, and this is actually one of the big staples of using a Ranger as a sub. On top of all of that, you will also get access to all of Ranger's traps and grenades, which can come in handy in different situations, and are also really good for PP regen. All in all, Ranger really isn't a bad sub to Gunner, but I would really suggest using a different sub until you're more familiar with the class. I know I covered a lot of it in this video, but if you want a more in-depth look at Gunner's skill tree, check out the skill tree video I made to go along with this one. If you're all set, but would still like a level 75 tree to look at for reference, or would like to read up more on Gunner, check out the links in the description. And with that, take care.